In this tutorial video we're going to be looking at the last of the loop statements, which is known as the for loop or the for statement, whichever you prefer. So the for statement or the for loop provides a compact way to iterate over a range of values. Programmers often refer to it as the for loop because of the way in which it repeatedly loops until a particular condition is satisfied. So this is how it's represented theoretically here. So when using this version of the for statement, keep in mind that the initialization expression, which we have here at the beginning, int count equals 1, that initializes the loop. So it's executed once as the loop begins. When the termination expression in the middle here evaluates to false, the loop will terminate. And then at the end here you have the increment expression, which is invoked after each iteration through the loop. So it's perfectly acceptable for this expression to increment or decrement a value. And then we have our instruction here, print out this sentence. So that's the theory behind the for statement or the for loop. In the next step we're going to apply this to a practical example. So keeping in mind the example we saw in the previous step, let's try and start by typing that out into Eclipse. So to start off with, let's create our for statement. So for, and inside that for statement we're going to directly initialize our variable, or create our variable if you prefer. So int, and we'll create a variable named count, which will assign a value of 1 to. Like so, semicolon, and then we want to add our termination expression. So our termination expression would be when count reaches 11, semicolon. So our termination expression is basically when count, as I said, when count reaches 11, we want our loop to terminate. So that's the condition of our loop. And then right at the end here we have our increment expression. So count plus plus. Our increment expression, as I've said in the previous videos, it's when you add plus 1 to your variable, so count is always getting bigger so it can actually reach the termination expression. Otherwise it's always going to stay at 1. So count plus plus, count plus 1, and then we need to close our parentheses, open up the brackets like so, next line, don't forget the indentation if Eclipse hasn't done it for you. And now we're going to add our instruction that we want to repeat. So system.out.println. We want to print out the following sentence. Excuse me. Count is like so, plus count. So adding the variable at the end, like so. Then, as you can see, Eclipse has already added our closing bracket here for the entire loop, so we don't need to add it ourselves. So just to recap, and before we launch the program, we started off by creating our for loop statement, or our for statement. Inside that for statement, we initialize directly our variable count with a value of 1. Then we added our termination expression here. So when count reaches 11, we want our loop statement to end. And then at the very end of our for statement, we have our increment expression, which is adding 1 each time to count. So that count is always getting bigger so that it can reach the termination expression. Then we opened up the brackets to have our instruction that we want to repeat. So in this case, print out this sentence, system.out.println, print out the following sentence: count is followed by the variable count. So let's run this by clicking on run. Okay, and as you can see, the sentence is printed out several times until count reaches 10 and not 11, because as we've said, it has to be strictly inferior to 11, so 10. So that's how you use a for statement, and now we've seen how to use all of the loop statements in Java.